Although it may not seem like it due to their pitiful attempt in World War II, the French army played a big role in World War I. Although it is clear the French were not as advanced as Britain and Germany, as they lacked tanks and flamethrowers and basic weapons such as reliable light machine guns, during the Great War they were still a mighty force. As French General Joseph Joffre once said, "The German is the discipline of fear, ours is the discipline of faith, and faith will triumph." France was brought into World War I by a German declaration of war on August 3, 1914, and at this time, the French army was very capable of mobilizing over 1.7 million troops. The French Navy also consisted of 2 modern dreadnoughts, 32 cruisers, 86 destroyers, 19 battleships, and 34 submarines. Yeah, sounds a little bit small, but you gotta remember, this is at a time where 27 cents nowadays was equivalent to about 1 penny at the time, and also the fact that back then, a dreadnought cost a mere $61,020,824 in today's value. The first battle that was fought between France and the Central Powers took place on September 6, 1914, during the First Battle of the Marne. The Germans truly learned the strength of their neighbors France, as the battle only lasted about 6 days and resulted in a French and British victory, and although you could argue that France's victory against Germany was all because of Britain, it is still clear that the French military really showed its strength and commitment on that day. Now it's time to put on your gas masks that were not used by any military force besides the Germans and go back to the Second Battle of Ypres, where chlorine gas was used for the first time against the French. Designed by a chemist by the name of Fritz Haber, chlorine gas would completely destroy the respiratory system and would lead to a slow, painful death by asphyxiation. Because of the horrible sight, thick green and yellow clouds of gas, French soldiers at first thought it was a smokescreen, but when troops started to complain about chest pain and difficulty breathing, the French defense slowly began to crumble. French troops ran out of their trenches and tried to retreat. Most of them were cut down by machine gun fire. Surprisingly, though, because the Germans were hesitant to recapture the French line because of fear of what the gas would do to them, giving Canadian and British troops enough time to recapture the position. The British were the first to start work on new gas weapons after its initial use at Ypres. The British deployed the horrible weapon on September of 1915, but when the wind was in their favor, well, at the time, the wind began to blow back at them and led to the gas being blown into their faces. Now, let's go back to France and talk about some of their main battle tanks. Number 1, the Renault FT-17 light tank, invented in 1917 by Louis Renault. The FT-17 was given the nickname the world's first modern tank. The FT-17 saw use at the Second Battle of the Marne, as well as the Saint-Mihiel and Argonne offensives. France's other main battle tank was the Saint-Chamond. Invented in 1916, the Saint-Chamond was armed with a 75mm field gun at the front and LMGs on the side. It was very clear that the tank had a few major drawbacks, such as its weight and poor ability to drive on muddy terrain. But let's stop talking about tanks for a second, move on to flamethrowers. The first flamethrowers were just like gas, also used against the poor French soldiers. It first saw combat during the assault on the forest of Malenfort at Verdun on February 26, 1916, where the poor helpless French soldiers ran out of their trenches straight into enemy machine gun fire.